Welcome to the AppSec Insiders Podcast. I'm Jared, and joined with me is my co-host Iman. Today we're going to be talking about, continuing our conversation about ASVS. We'll be looking at sections 5 and 6 today. As always, this is a show where we explore the ever-evolving and intriguing world of application and cloud security. Before we get into today's discussion, a few housekeeping items. To meet us in person, you can check out our events page. Or we'll be at Money 2020, which is the largest global fintech conference being held in Las Vegas this year, October 23rd. And we will have people there. I personally won't be there, but we will have people there. Recently, we launched our Eureka DevSecops platform, which centrally orchestrates your scanners, correlates the results. It manages your application security threats and risks. It does a whole bunch of other things. Check it out on our website, forwardsecurity.com, or in the Azure Marketplace, where we've already launched it. If you're an AppSec professional and you're looking for an opportunity to work with some of the best in the industry, a developer, if you're a developer with an interest in cybersecurity, in either case, be sure to check out our careers page at forwardsecurity.com/careers. Lastly, if you're not already subscribed, please consider subscribing and share it with anyone who you think might enjoy listening. That would mean a lot to us. So, Iman, do you want to tell us what is Category 5 and give us a brief overview? What is it we're talking about?
Yeah, Category 5 is one of the most interesting one out of all, I believe. It's about validation, sanitization, and encoding verification requirements.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you, if you do the sanitization correctly and use positive whitelisting and strong data typing, you can eliminate 90% of all injection attacks. And this is a very tough category to test sometimes. And we have many of those famous attacks here. Like, for example, if I don't know, I believe all of you have heard of XSS, SQL injection, I don't know, SSRF. All of them are under this category, and LFI, RFI, XML, XXE, command injection, all of them. And because of that, this is one of the most interesting categories for me. And to test this category, usually it takes most of the time. If we compare the time that we spend on each category, this is one of the most time consuming categories. And the tool that we use is Burp Suite for dynamically checking stuff, and also for some of the issues such as SQL injection. We have great SaaS tools such as Vercode that helps us to find them. Like, for example, also we use SemGrep to find SQL injection. And this is gonna be great. But in general, one of the way that I'm gonna test that I test this category using Burp is that I'm gonna put the target website and a scope, and then Burp has the ability for live scanning everything that is in a scope, and then you need to start to browse website and browse the web application, and you need to go through all the stuff that you find. And other than that, I kind of contributed to ASVS. I've kind of proposed around a dozen, 12 items to ASVS that they have kind of accepted that to add to the new version. And there are new items that are coming for ASVS version 5, which is such as a JNDI injection, which I proposed, and port pollution, some stuff that we can talk about that. What do you think about this category, Jared?
Well, personally, there's not much to add. I think you've covered a lot of the stuff there. It's definitely the hardest one to test for. It's definitely the one that has the simplest solution, but also sometimes the most complicated not most complicated to implement a fix for, but the most time consuming. I personally, this is the category where, as a pen tester, I really enjoy looking for stuff. This is where you really find the fun findings. Category 5 is your SQL injection and your remote code execution and XSS. and SSRFs and things like that. All the things that Iman already named, which are, those are the juicy findings. Of course, no security report is complete without, oh, your cookies aren't using such and such flag. But these are the ones that really make the clients go, wow, and are probably the most powerful
Yeah.
as a single item. Now, for ASVS, there's a lot of times where a lot of the little ones add up together and become a big deal, become a major vulnerability. But in this category, you have a single item can be damaging on its own. So pretty fun to test.
How do you test these category items? Like, for example, how do you test, like, I don't know, SSRF for this category?
Yeah. Well, I think it depends what type of thing you're trying to test for. So if we use SSRF as an example, I'm always, whenever I'm testing a website, I always have my eyes open for any time that a domain is taken as input, a domain or a URL.
Can you give us some examples where we can find that?
Sure. Yeah. So let's say I'm going to come up with a fake example because otherwise I'm going to end up accidentally saying something about a client. But let's say that you have some service that you want people to be able to set their own avatars from any website. So you give them an opportunity to put in a URL, and your application will go and pull the image from that URL and make it their avatar. Well, right away, I go, okay, well, this website is fetching from an external server. So I'm going to try to put in my rogue server and see what kind of information I can get out of it. And that's usually the first step. I go, okay, so it is reaching out. It's reaching out to me. I can see what kinds of things it's sending. I might get some extra information. For instance, if they're not locked to the load balancer. In other words, if they have an SSL certificate or TLS certificate to their load balancer, but they don't have one between the server and the load balancer, right? They're expecting that all the traffic comes in through the load balancer. But using SSRF, sometimes you can expose the actual IP of the server, and you can try to make requests directly to it, and you can bypass web application firewalls and stuff that way. So that's the number one type of thing I look for if WAF is blocking your attempts at other injections. The other thing it can be useful for, the next thing I'll usually try is, okay, can I map the internal network? So I'll try localhost, and I'll try it the full like 256, like a subnet. So I'll try all 256 on the last, the IP range on the last byte. I'll scan that. I'll scan the ports. Now this also assumes that we can get feedback from the localhost from this SSRF endpoint. You don't always get. Sometimes it's blind, in which case there are other ways to do it. Timing based attacks. And then, of course, if they're in a cloud infrastructure, there's the metadata instance URL. But I think a lot of those have been patched because now you need special headers to access that. It wasn't always the case. The other thing that I'll try is file URLs. See if I can access, the Etsy password file, things like that, starting with file : // That's what I'll do with SSRF. But how will I find it? I look for any input that's taken a URL. So yeah, maybe it's scraping an image. Maybe it's it allows you to configure a printer. Maybe it's there's lots of instances where it might take a URL. How do you look for them?
I mean, you've mentioned great stuff. For sure, one of the tools that I use is Web Collaborator.
Mm-hmm.
This is one of the good ones because always you need a payload and you need like a stable way to verify that.
Yeah.
But in general, like we have like as you told, we have two types of SSRF, like normal SSRF.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's the dream of any attacker. We see the response in this category. We have blind SSRF, we have time-based SSRF, and the places that I look for, like any places that the app accepts any URL, even like one of the places that I've seen a lot of SSRF issues that when the application accepts like a webhook callback, usually they're not sanitizing that webhook callback. I've seen some situations that you upload a file. This is gonna be an HTML, and sometimes the app converts that to PDF. And meanwhile, sometimes if you put like an iframe or something, then you can run the SSRF attack. But one of the biggest SSRF attack that I've heard of is the one with Capital One, the breach that this is very famous.
Mm-hmm.
The attacker was able to extract the AWS secret token using SSRF and dump all these three buckets. And but in general, even sometimes people they think that if we have like a blind SSRF, we cannot do anything. But in general, like I've seen a situation that the attacker was able to shut down an Elasticsearch instance using a blind SSRF
Mm-hmm.
by guessing some of the IPs. And but in general,
Because you can send a shutdown command to it, right?
yeah, it's like a get command. It's very easy if it's an authenticated thing, an unauthenticated thing. Then you can just send a get request shutdown, and you can shut down the cluster.
Hmm.
And on the other hand, like it's a good attack. I mean, there are many ways that you can leverage SSRF. But other than that, like interesting stuff that I propose to ASVS team to add. One of them is like Symlink, and Symlink is like malicious Symlink. Like
Mm-hmm.
GitLab was vulnerable to this attack. For example, you were able to import a zip file to GitLab as a source code or something like that, and you were able to pass a Symlink file that is pointing to etc passwd. And then when GitLab was importing that, then it was showing the etc passwd of the server because it was just a symbolic link. And this is kind of new addition that you will see in ASVS version 5. And I mean, this is not an SRF, but it's interesting actually. It's kind of like LFI, RFI in that category.
Yeah.
Usually, when we talk about LFI, RFI, we always think about PHP, because this is a pattern that you see vulnerable codes they're vulnerable and they're written in PHP. Other
Mm-hmm.
than that, like there are other nice items here that we can talk. For example, like XSS. Do you want to talk about XSS, Jared? Like, how do you find them? How many categories do we have?
Yeah. XSS, I just do a cluster bomb. I just put HTML tags into every single field that I can. Um, and I try not to use alert too much because what ends up happening is as I'm trying to click through a page, if 10 fields are vulnerable, then every time I go to that page, I got to click OK to close the alert. So I'll do things like I'll bold stuff. um, I'll use H1 tags, things like that, and I'll just put those wherever I can, and or image tags, broken image tags, without in event handler, because then you see the icon. Those are pretty good and unobtrusive. So I just put those everywhere: first name, last name, middle name, phone number, address. And if there's any front end validation, I'll fill out the form appropriately, the way that the front end wants me to. Then I'll go and burp. I'll proxy that request, and I'll just fill it in with all my image tags, my broken image tags, or whatever. Um,
Yeah, that is
and
interesting.
yeah,
How many categories do we have in XSS?
how many categories? We have our reflected XSS, we have our stored XSS, we have our DOM XSS. Um,
Awesome. And how do you
now,
find DOM XSS issues?
yeah, DOM XSS, it's a lot tougher for sure. I think generally speaking, okay, so DOM XSS is XSS that doesn't really require the server. Um, it can happen right in the browser. Sometimes it involves the server, but it doesn't have to usually. Uh, it all happens in the code on the browser. So one thing you could do is you have access to the code in the browser. You can copy it into a SAST tool and look for, um, injection type attacks using semgrep or something like that. That can certainly speed it up because a lot of the time it'll be web-packed or minified and very hard to read. Other things I'll do is I'll put payloads everywhere I can. And usually when I'm finding DOM XSS, which doesn't happen all that often because most people are using frameworks like React or Angular that protect against it. But usually if I do find it, it'll be a reflected type of XSS. So it'll be something I put as a parameter in the URL. And that parameter, while it does technically go to the server doesn't do anything with it. And when the page loads, the front end takes that value and does something with it. So I've found a few that way.
Also, Burp has released an extension like DOM Invader. Like that is a good thing. Have you
It
used
does
that?
some automatically also.
Yeah.
Like in the active
It's
scanner, it will automatically do some some dynamic analysis on the source code.
yeah, exactly. Also, in the DOM Invader, you can set a canary and then you can play with it. And whenever you put the canary, it will detect that where you can exploit that vulnerability. And that is interesting. And XSS, people they think that XSS is not very harmful, but it can be very dangerous. It depends actually, like on the situation. Like for example, I've seen like many people they put access token in local storage, which is a very bad practice. They should always use cookie. And how they can prevent this attack? Like let's assume that we have a vulnerable code and this is vulnerable to XSS, but I want some more defensive layers to protect us. How we can do that?
Yeah, using a front end framework really helps. Because a lot of them protect against that. But I think one of the most powerful things you can do, because it's so simple and it works in almost every modern browser, is the content security policy header. This is a header that was introduced years ago, but a lot of people still aren't using it. And essentially, you can tell it which domains you want to allow JavaScript to be loaded from. So obviously, you would include your own site. You have all those JavaScript files that you want to serve to your front end. And then let's say you load in Google Fonts or Typekit or I don't know, so whatever, Hotjar or whatever JavaScript file you're pulling in, you would put those domains in the header. Now, anytime somebody tries to load a JavaScript file from outside that domain, the browser just blocks it. The other thing it blocks is inline JavaScript. So that's anything between a script tag, that's anything in an on-error event handler, on an image, broken image, stuff like that gets completely blocked. So it has the side effect that it can potentially cause you to have to rewrite your old website if you have a lot of inline script stuff. But, I think it's probably about time you did that anyways, because it's just bad hygiene, not even from a security standpoint, to have all the script tags. So that's one of the most powerful things you can do. It probably removes about 90% of threats. The other 10% of threats that remain are, if you're using eval statements in your own JavaScript code and you're taking input on those. That kind of stuff can get blocked. I'm sure there are other examples I'm not thinking of, maybe redirects.
And I have a question. Like, let's assume that I have a CSP. I've written that. How can I evaluate that it's a good one or no?
You can try loading JavaScript files from outside your domain. You can try putting in script tags, and if you find that they run, then you haven't done it properly. But it's very simple to set up. It's a header you add to every GET request.
I see.
Any request that displays information on the screen, you add this header. I mean, it doesn't hurt to put it in your post. It doesn't matter. You can put it everywhere. But you add it with the values script-src, and then there's a whole Mozilla page that really documents it really well. You can put self, you can put other domains, and as long as you don't add unsafe eval or unsafe, there you go, it blocks eval too. So then what is the other case where the other 10% where it doesn't work? I got to think about that. It's been a while since I've run into that because it's a very rare situation.
That's a good practice. Also, I'm using like a CSP evaluator from Google. Like I paste the CSP and finds all the issues. Like one of the issues that I've seen is like object SRC. People they forgot to add the rules for that. But
Yeah.
those CSP evaluators, I mean, it reduces the testing time if we want to test the CSP, but manually. But that's something that I use. Other than that, look, maybe
Well,
we
there
can
is
talk
actually
about
there's one
good.
more thing you can do to test it. There's a content security policy report URI. I have to double check that header, but it's something like that. And you can give it either a webhook endpoint or, yeah, I think you have to give it a webhook endpoint. And then once it detects something, it will block it from running and it'll send a little message to your webhook.
Yeah, interesting. That's a very good one. And other than that, like, what about HTTP only? Like putting the like
So this is
stopping.
interesting. Yeah. So, I think it kind of gives a false sense of security. So let's start from the beginning. What's Iman talking about? He's saying that when you have somebody log in, you set a session token. The safest place to put it is in your cookie, right? I think we talked about this in the last episode. It wasn't always thought to be the safest. That it wasn't a great place to put your cookie, but nowadays it is. The cookies have been reinforced. Um, and one of the ways that they did that was they added this flag that you can set called HTTP only. And what that essentially means is only the server can read and write to the cookie, that particular cookie. It means that the browser doesn't expose the cookie in JavaScript. So if I'm an attacker and I'm able to find some cross-site scripting and I inject some JavaScript, I can't read your cookie and I can't steal your session token. Okay, that's great. I think that's really great because it means that as an attacker, I can't steal your session token and then just click around and see what I can do. But if I already know what I want to do with your session, I can just pre-program that into my JavaScript. I don't need your cookie for that. So setting HTTP only has a bit of a false sense of security. Yes, it makes it a little bit more complicated for the attacker, but it doesn't actually take away their ability to do any of the things that they could have done with the session token. What do you think
That's
about that?
interesting. What was SQLi like? How we can prevent that?
I'm still seeing it. A couple clients that I'm working on right now. You would think that it would be a dead um, security vector, but it has definitely dropped down in popularity, which is nice, and that I think is in part due to the OWASP top 10's popularity. People learn about it and they go, "Oof, that's the number one most popular, excuse me, injection style. Let's protect against that." And really, there's no substitute to either using an ORM or parameterizing and preparing your SQL statements. If you really can't use those, maybe you're memory constrained, or maybe I don't know what other reasons might there be. If it's sometimes some frameworks don't let you do prepared or parameterized variables as a table name. I wouldn't accept those as input anyways, but I know that there are unique edge cases. In those cases, you got to be using regular expressions to create an allow list of characters that can go in there. And that means you're blocking anything that's not a letter, uppercase, lowercase, and maybe a number, maybe a
Yeah.
hyphen. There's no need to have semicolons, percent signs, hyphens. I don't know. Hyphens are iffy because a double hyphen can be a comment depending on which SQL server or which SQL technology you're using.
That is interesting. And with SQLi, one of the issues that I've seen is that customers they only care about like the user input. Sometimes they're using a third-party API,
Mm-hmm.
and I've seen a situation that they don't sanitize the data that they receive from third-party API,
Right.
and they were vulnerable to that point via the third-party. They think that like all the third-party APIs that they use, they're like bulletproof. Like if they use
Yeah.
PayPal or any other SendGrid, anything else.
Microsoft. Yeah.
But yeah, the issue is that if someone compromises, like for example, SendGrid or any other third-party API,
Mm-hmm.
then they can pivot and attack you.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, that's the other thing that I've seen that people they neglect. Sometimes they neglect.
Yeah.
And
And especially because, we're mostly talking about big companies that would be victims of espionage or nation state attacks. If you're running
yeah,
a yogurt website, a blog about different flavors of yogurt, you probably don't need to worry about those types of attacks as much.
Exactly.
But nation state attackers, APTs, advanced persistent threats, we call them, will use those types of resources. I mean, it sounds like way too much effort, but it's not. This is what they do. They spend 40 hours a week, hundreds of man hours, and lots of zero-day exploits archived for later use. And they will use those to get that kind of information, and they will go through those really roundabout routes to get there. There's some interesting stories I remember hearing on Darknet Diaries a few episodes ago about just some of the links. They were talking to somebody who worked in, I think, the Navy, and they were just talking about the types of precision and the types of organization that they had in order to break into enemy sites or whatever.
That's
It's a lot of sophistication.
The other interesting thing for me is the deserialization issue, Jared. Like, I've seen, like, the .NET Nuke, like, they were vulnerable to deserialization via cookie, and this could lead to an RC, like full RC. I'm not talking about like just stealing people's cookie.
Yeah.
So
this is SQL injection, by the way.
Yeah, SQL injection is also very dangerous, but SQL injection, as you told, like right now because of OWASP top 10, is we don't see them a lot, but finding a deserialization issue, I believe it's harder thing, and that is something that we should usually do it manually or also with SAST and DAS, but in general, deserialization attacks are also very dangerous.
Yeah. Being able to basically,
how do you find that?
You can instantiate any class that's available.
Yeah.
How do I find that? I will look for. I will literally look for instances of deserialization functions being called. SAS tools are usually pretty good at this, such to the point where usually I'll usually go and double check using my own. I've got a stored list of regular expressions that I've been building up over the years to help me search for things faster. And at this point, I'm pretty much just doubling the effort of good SAS scanners. They tend to find all that stuff pretty well. So luckily, it's something that it's very easy to find with a pattern, because deserialization doesn't happen on its own. No one's rolling their own serialization. I mean, if they are, they deserve it. Because there's so many easier ways to do it, and every language has their own either built-in function or popular library.
I believe we should always run the integrity checks and even encrypt the. I mean, I believe it's a bad practice to have a deserialized object that is coming from the user, but in general, if we have it, we should do the integrity checks. We should sign it. We should encrypt it, and we should protect it using like cryptographic algorithms.
Yeah, validate the schema.
To avoid any tampering issues. I believe like right now we have covered category 5. This session was good for covering category 5. And maybe we can continue the session based on the feedback that we received from the audience. And that's it. Is there anything that you want to say before outro?
I'll just say that there are definitely some types of injection attacks that we didn't talk about, and that's okay because there's just a lot to talk about. But I think we covered the major ones, and if you're very interested, I highly recommend going to the OWASP website and downloading the OWASP Application Security Verification Standard 4.0, or for short, ASVS. That's what we're looking at, and you can get a sense for all the different things that pen testers would look for in this category. It won't tell you how to find them. That's left up to you as an exercise, but lots of literature out there. We don't just we're not all reinventing the wheel out here. So that's great. All good. Yeah. So take us into the outro, Iman.
Yeah, that concludes this episode of our AppSec Insiders Podcast. We hope you've enjoyed learning about OWASP ASVS, especially the category 5. And remember to tune in next time as we delve deeper into the world of application and cloud security and explore new ways to protect our digital assets. Also, there is a conference thing called Money 2020 in Las Vegas in October 25th and October 26th. And also, we appreciate your support and engagement. If you have any topics in your mind, please don't hesitate. Reach us at AppSec Insiders at sign forwardsecurity.com, or our Twitter handle is FWD_SEC, or feel free to follow Forward Security on LinkedIn for the latest in application security news and other opportunities. Also, please consider subscribing to our podcast and have a good one.